Hello DevOps people, I'm back with Full Stack Live, my weekly live coding stream. I'm happy to have you on the stream. Hello to everyone who's watching. And yeah, I have got good news, my hay fever is finally under control. I got myself a good nasal spray and that did the trick. Not only does my nose not itch anymore, and it doesn't drive me nuts anymore. I also feel much less exhausted and fatigued than I did recently. The recent weeks were quite difficult because I was always working and living through a haze of tiredness, and it was really it's been such a drag, and that's all gone. I was even afraid that I had some kind of disease, and I might still have. I'll get my blood tested next week, but I feel much better, and so I think it was just my allergy that just kept draining my batteries. And I think that also makes me much more fit for the stream. I think I'll be able to think more clearly and get things done more easily. And I hope that'll show in this week's session. Okay, so before I begin, as always, I'd like to invite you to join me in the chat. I enjoy these sessions the most when they are interactive, and when you give me feedback, when you say hello, when you ask me questions about the strange things I'm doing here. So don't feel shy, and let's have a conversation. Alrighty, so over the last weeks I've been working on a change in my company's hosting dashboard, and let's see if we can finish it today. It's in this private repository here, and let's see, the issue was issue 334, if I recall that correctly. Yep. So when I started this Ruby on Rails application, I used as many best practice gems as possible. So the application uses a device for authentication, and I chose CanCanCan for authorization, just to distinguish the two. One is for user management and login, so just to authenticate people, to assign a user to a visitor, basically. And authentication, no, did I get it mixed up? So authentication is the login, and authorization determines who is allowed to do what, and I chose CanCanCan for that. Over time I noticed that CanCanCan is a bit unwieldy because it uses a hash to define the permissions. It's like a matrix that defines who is allowed to do what. And if things get more complex on the database side, or simply if you have a very complex permission system, then CanCanCan makes things a bit more complicated, I think. And so I saw what were the alternatives, and I found that action policy could be a good alternative. Hey Daniel, happy to have you on the stream, welcome. The difference is that action policy uses actual Ruby code to decide if a user is allowed to do a certain action or not. And since code can be as complex as you want it to be, you have all the possibilities, and you can keep it simple if you like, and you can make it more complex if you must. So that's the goal of this whole issue number 334. And the thing I have been suffering from, and that's the reason why I'm still working on this issue after many hours of work, is that action policy is still pretty new, and sometimes I got confused by their documentation, which gets created or generated from the master branch of the gem, and that is not always reflecting what the latest released version can do. So I found myself in quite a few dead ends there that I had to find my way out of by rereading the documentation, or more often than not reading the code and looking what was actually there. But I think I'm on a good trajectory now, and we can get this maybe finished today. So let's switch to my dashboard API. Tmux session where I'm already in this issue. You can see it from the branch name 334 action policy, and you can even see where I left off last time. We still had 18 failures in the test suite, and this might be actual breakage in the test or breakage in the business logic, and we'll have to look at each and every of these tests to see what the cause of the failure is. And I think I'll simply go ahead with the things that are connected to device, but because I think we simply have the issue there that these controllers don't authorize at all, and I have an assertion in the application controller that raises an exception if no authorization gets done in the first place, because at least I'd like to have a authorization done that the user may do everything they want, and so if things work without any authorization, then the application controller will simply raise an exception. And I imagine the features here, user password change and user registration spec, that they break because of the missing authorization. That's pretty straightforward to solve, I think. Slayer Darth, welcome to the stream. Happy to have you here. I'm excellent today. As I told a few minutes ago, I finally found a nasal spray that with which I got my allergy under control, and I feel much more energized now that the allergy doesn't get on my nerves anymore. You are clean shaven today. Why? Are you going to a wedding, or what's the occasion? Okay, so let's see. We'll run this single spec. I should have started code before. So normally you let your beard simply grow out. Is it that? Okay, that's quite some backtrace. Yeah, see, that's exactly what I meant. The application controller throws an exception because registrations edit hasn't been authorized in any way, and which means we don't have control over who uses this. Obviously, a registration should be done by anyone, so our control here will be pretty loose, but we still should exert some kind of control. Now, I'm not sure if I have an actual controller or if that's provided by the device gem, but let's have a look. Uh, You have been continuing with your 6502 assembly code. What kind of maths are you dealing with in your project? Oh, the binary stuff. Okay, yeah, that's something you have to get a grasp on to see what um, exactly, for example, the two's complement is if you're doing um, and masks and things like that. So let's fire up code, which, by the way, seems to be amazingly popular, especially among live streamers. You can't switch on a Twitch live coding stream without seeing VS Code. It's amazing that Microsoft seems to have done such a great job with providing an IDE that it gets adopted by all kinds of people, even hardcore Vim users like myself. You will likely deal with bitwise operators if you're doing SQL, for instance. Not sure. Why do you think this applies to the SQL space? I can't think of an example from the top of my head. But yeah, having a solid grasp on binary logic and Boolean logic definitely will help you with in any coding situation. So let me see. We have a few controllers. Here, there's a registrations controller. Brilliant. And how is this supposed to be? We have to authorize. That's a comment that's really not necessary, and actually I'm not sure how I'm going to do it. I think we just do a before action, right? Because I don't want to implement all the rest verbs here if I can go around it. I'm pretty sure MySQL supports bitwise operators, but yeah, as Daniel says, I can't think of a practical use case where you'd use that. I've never come upon a SQL statement that would do bitwise operations because, yeah, except if you are actually storing binary data in the database, which I usually don't do. Yeah, so action policy. Action policy. I could use skip verify authorized here. Because for a registration I really don't need authorization. Who knows what statements queries are being executed half the time? Well, probably I am, because I have to deal with all the database slowness that our customers are experiencing. And most of the time it's because of some strangely formulated query or missing indexes or things like that. Okay, so that was easy to fix. Back to the full test suite. Now we should be down to 17 failures. And I guess, what was the other thing? The login. Oh, that's already got a skip verify authorized. So we'll have to see why this is still failing. In the past, we used to use binary bit fields for setting setting certain flags. So you had an 8-bit or 16-bit value that stood for 8 or 16 different flags or toggles, and you could simply check by an AND operation if a certain toggle was switched on or off. But nowadays you probably do that differently, probably by simply giving each flag its own database column and simply checking if it's true or yes or something like that. Yeah, so if there's something you'd like to store, which is a lot of Boolean or binary data, which can be 0 or 1, you can store that very efficiently in a single byte or a 16-bit value, and you have 8 or 16 values in a very compact storage format. And so you could simply say, okay, if bit number 3 is set, then this means something. And you would do an AND operation to filter out this single bit, regardless what the other, which values the other bits have, and you'll see if it's set or not. So you do basically an AND with a mask that only has the 3rd bit set, and the result will either be 0 because it's not set, or it will be the value of that 3rd bit, which is 4, and you'll see that it was set. I hope I'm making sense. It's a bit hard to describe that in words, but I think you know what I mean. Okay, so let's see. We only have 15 failures because obviously, apparently the registration thing resolved a few of these failures, which I'm happy about. Now I'll check why the user registration spec isn't working. Oops. So while this is running, I can try and explain it a bit more. If I have, say, a byte with 8 bits, and you'd like to check the 3rd bit, bit number 3, which has the value 4, you'd like to filter that out because other bits might be set as well. So the value might be 138, and now you'd like to check if in this 138 is the 3rd bit set, is the bit that has the value 4 set or not. And to filter it out, you do an AND operation that has with a value that has zeros for all the bits. So regardless if the bit is set or not, it'll get ANDed with a 0, which results in 0. And only the bit number 3 will be set. So you AND with the value 4 to the power of 2. Because we're starting to count from 0, so it's 0, 1, 2, that's the third bit, and 2 to the power of 2 is 4. So you do your field and 4, and the result will either be 0 because the third bit was 0 in the first place, or it'll be 4 because it was set. And that's how you know that the bit number 3 was set in that original value. That's exactly what I meant with being able to do this binary math. Really helps understand things. I could even have used something like this here. I should be able to do that in Ruby, because so let's say we have the value 138, and if I do A and 4, it's 0, because the bit number 3 wasn't set, because it's 128, not 64, not 40, 28, so it's a 10, 32, 16, the 8 is set, the 4 is not set, the 2 is set. I'm missing one bit. Let's start. 128, 64, 32, 16 isn't set, 8 is set, 4 is not set actually, and the 2 is set, and the 1 is not set. That's 138 in binary. And as I just proved up there, the bit number 3, this one here, is not set. However, if we do 140, I hope I'm guessing this right. Yeah. If I do, yeah, basically I'm explaining bitwise operations, because oh dear. Okay, I hope I'm not too confusing everyone. Yeah, so 140, just to bring this to an end, is 128, 64, 32, it's 12, right? So this 16 isn't set either, 8 is set, 4 is set, 2 is set, and the 1 is not set. That should be 140 in binary, and as you can see, this time this third bit is set, and the AND operation therefore returns 4. Enough. Let's get back to my original work here. So it complains that pages confirm email hasn't been authorized. Okay, that's an integration test that not only calls the registration, it also redirects to a page that informs the user that they'll get an email to confirm their email address, and it's this pages controller that doesn't authorize. That's also easy to fix, because I can change it here. That's left over from CanCanCan, I think. Skip before action, authenticate user. And I can simply do skip verify authorized, because the static pages don't need any authorization, not at this time anyway. Oh, it still fails. It should display thanks for signing up, and it actually displays you need to be logged in. So not only need we to skip the authorization, I think we also need to skip the authentication. And I wonder why that... Oh, that's why, because this is not this is device, and I'll have to add skip verify authorized. So we skip the authentication, and now we skip the authorization. Okay. I recognize this this song. It has a very confusing timer ending sound in it that drove me nuts the first time I heard it. Because what is my phone beeping, or what's happening here? Okay, fixed it. See, that was it. Okay. Now that was the worst commit message I've ever wrote, because I didn't even write fix pages controller, but I'll refactor, or I'll rebase this anyway. So many HTML pages on these topics on university websites. Yes, of course, because people get paid to teach these things, even though they are not too relevant anymore. I wonder if there's some sort of legal requirement for some universities to publish these sorts of tutorials on their websites. I don't think so, but it's for someone who has to teach and gets paid teaching, which I admit I was in the past. I worked as a Linux trainer for several years. That's content you can easily get up with, come up with, and well, it's that kind of basics that you teach new computer science students, even if you yourself don't really know if it's worth the time. But it's low-hanging fruit for a teacher, I guess. And yes, it's basically free advertisement, because people see, okay, they're publishing stuff that I didn't know, so it seems to do a good job with teaching stuff that people don't know, and that's exactly what universities are for, I guess. And I spent a lot of time studying, because I didn't spend time studying. While I was studying computer science, I started my first company, and I pretty much did only that then, and tried to weasel through as much as I could. I did finish my studies and I did graduate, but only by so much. And look where it brought me. Now I'm sitting here and watching tests fail. And actually, Slayer Darth, you have a point there. You don't have to attend university. You can just read their tutorials. I guess having someone who explains the more complex stuff really is worth something. And so I'm not going to say that universities are worthless. But if you are the self-teaching kind of person, then you can actually learn a lot outside of school, of any school. And I've moved to the country where all the cloud servers are. Yes, I did. And I can't complain about my internet connection as well. And I got my degree more or less for free, that's right. Well, I guess my parents paid for it by paying taxes. So, 14 failures, and 4 of them are in the cluster order spec. So I guess that's the next thing that I'd like to do. So just thinking ahead, when I have resolved all these failures, I think I finished replacing CanCanCan with action policy, because it seems to behave the same way than CanCanCan did before. But I've actually added another task in the issue, because I noticed that the test suite is missing a few negative tests. So to check that if someone is not authorized, they should not be able to do something. And I think there are several places where I don't test that. Do you think the physical servers ever become dented by potatoes? Oh, you're doing island jokes now. I'd be careful with that. I'm not Irish, but I think the natives don't react too well to potato jokes or famine jokes in general. Okay, let's see. Expected to find text, enter your credit card, and it says authorization error with no comment. Okay. But no, I don't think the data center is in any kind of danger from potatoes. So it's cluster order spec and the cluster order controller, I guess. Cluster orders controller, and I do a before action authorize. So that would have been another way I could have resolved the previous failures, simply by adding a before action authorize without having to add it explicitly into each verb. And I guess let's take a look at the test log. If there is more information. That's the thing. I just get authorization error and the reasons are empty. That's the thing I didn't research last time, how to get to the reasons, because that's one of the issues that is resolved in the master branch of action policy, but I don't think it's released yet. Let's take a look if that's actually the case. I think we're using version 0.2.4. And release is still 0.2.4, okay. Okay, so something's going wrong even though we authorize. The cluster order policy says everyone is allowed to order, and new create show edit update is aliased to order. Why doesn't it work then? So user orders a cluster. I think there's also some wording in terms of context and things that we need to improve. So it's the cluster order feature test. Context should start with when. Okay, let's add the magic comment frozen string true. Whoops. We don't need each because that's implied. And use it instead of scenario. Well, I'll have to check how to deal with feature specs and Ruby style, because I don't have an opinion on that yet. I'll have to read this up before I make more significant changes. So let's try and run this test again with the new wording so it gets more clear. Some of them work, some don't. So let's see. User orders a cluster. When customer has no credit, customer tries to order. Expect page to have content, enter your credit card. No, it says just one more step, please enter your payment details and you're good to go. Why would it expect enter your credit card? Cluster orders. So that should be under views. Cluster order. But there isn't any view. Oh, it's cluster orders, so we can remove this cluster order here. Shouldn't be there in the first place, I guess. Cluster orders, here we are, new. Okay, see, user orders cluster when customer has no credit, customer tries to order. And it should redirect to... Wait. User orders cluster. User has no credit. And we go to cluster orders path, then we'd expect the page to have content enter a credit card because it automatically redirects. And it looks like it does from the text here, please enter your payment details, but something's not right. So let's take a look at the cluster orders controller. Cluster order new. And we call fulfill order. Wait, how does this work? It's always a bad sign if you don't understand how your business logic works. So let's see. I go to cluster orders path, so that should get me to the index page of the cluster orders controller. And there we check if the customer has an associated company and if they have a credit card or another kind of credit established. And if that's not the case, we render no credit. So the no credit view says, please update your payment details. And it either says if you have a company, you need to enter your company details, or it says before you have to enter your credit card details. I see, that's why. So in this case, when customer has no credit, it shouldn't it displays just one more step, please enter your payment details. That's the screen that you get when you've just registered and don't have a credit card associated. And how do we get there? It's a different page. I think that's the home page. Enter your payment details. Oh yeah, that's the dashboard part. Dashboard hero. Sorry. Why do I get to this page and not to the cluster orders page? Maybe because we do this authorization. Let's see. Test log should show that. Processing by cluster orders controller index. We get an authorization error. And that redirects us to the home page, and the home page then recognizes, okay, they have a company but they don't have credit, so they need to enter their credit card data. So we should not get this authorization error in the first place. So we are calling index, and index is not aliased. That's why. That's why authorization fails and the whole thing fails. Okay. I got confused because just by accident getting redirected to the start page of the application displays something credit card detail Z as well, and that exactly fit our context here, but it's just an accident. Nice. Would it be worth in those tests to test for HTTP status code 200 as well? Is this common in the Ruby world to do so? Well, yeah, I think it is, and there are. It's easy to do. The thing is, I don't do that, at least not in integration tests where I actually exercise all the controllers. So the test framework actually fires up a headless browser and sees what happens. And in this case, I don't need an HTTP code 200. First of all, checking for certain content is much more explicit than just getting a 200. And then, for example, in this case, after the authorization error, I get redirected to the start page, and that gives me an HTTP 200 as well. The redirect first gives me a 301, and I shouldn't get redirected. But simply by checking that I get the content that I'm expecting, I think the test is more explicit than testing a 200. I guess checking for a 200, that's something I would do if I'm doing some kind of API test, for example, where I actually only expect a 200 as a confirmation that my API call was successful, and I might not even get some content back that I could check. But if I'm actually rendering a whole page, I'd skip checking the HTTP code and go right into the content that was delivered and see if that's actually what I'm expecting it to be. With an API, I would probably do the opposite. I wouldn't check back if the JSON that I get back only has a success string or something like that, because I find that very ugly. In this more API-like access, HTTP 200 tells me much more than just something did go right. In that case, I'd expect that the whole API call was successful. Probably because an API call is much more atomic in the sense of business logic while rendering a whole page. Could exercise the whole application. Okay, we're down to 8 failures. Then we have the website list spec. That's something I'd expect to work now, but apparently it doesn't. So let's see why. And let's commit the most recent change. Authorization for cluster order. It's getting dark outside. Okay, I expected to find text Feastbar US, which is a domain name that has been randomly generated. And it says authorization error, dashboard, clusters, order a new cluster. Okay, again, I got redirected to the start page. And we'll have to see why. Spec features, website list spec. Let's close the open editors. So spec features, website list, here we are. We can remove the each here to make Rubocop a bit more happy. Other than that, it looks pretty straightforward. We have 2 scenarios with websites and with deleted websites that shouldn't appear. However, I guess both times it's the index action of the websites controller. Which seems to work though, because the website's controller spec didn't break, did it? Or does it? No, that works, but the integration test doesn't. Interesting. Let's take another look at the log. That did help last time. So here we're calling the websites controller show and get an unauthorized. So let's see if we actually permit the show verb in the website policy. Oh, that's a spec. Interestingly, yeah, that one works. I remember fixing that, but I guess we could be missing some tests here. So let's go back to the website policy. Website policy. Just again. Here we go. Show edit update, but not index. Somehow I'm missing index permissions here. And the website policy spec. Not the website. Website policy spec, yeah, policy spec. Okay, that's a very low-level unit test, but we don't have any website controller spec. That actually checks the index verb, right? Here we have show, new, create, show, edit, update, destroy, and show again for another case, but we don't exercise the index verb. And that's why I didn't catch this before. We could... Yeah, we should add a... So let's remove that index again, just to get a red-green test going here. No root matches index websites. How's that possible? Ah, interesting. I think because I'm listing websites on the dashboard controller and not, I actually don't use the websites controller to display the list. Okay, that was a strange decision back in the day. So I'm not actually...
When your mind becomes demanding,
wait.
long for something, you will end up violating your own precepts. Not to tell lies, not to steal.
Now I'm getting confused here. So let's see, websites controller.
You keep your original mind. Precepts will keep themselves.
We do have an index
The beginner's
here,
mind is the mind of compassion. When our mind is
but there's no road to it, right? And that's also strange. What's happening here? Did that get auto generated?
always be a beginner. Be very, very careful about
Websites only show, edit, update, destroy. So there's no index routes. I think I'd like to return to a more Rails-like application structure where I don't use a different controller to display websites. Yeah, I think my decision back then was wrong. What I wanted to do is list the websites right on the home page when the user logs in. But in order to do that, I should have probably just made the website's index the root page of this application instead of introducing a dashboard controller that then takes over. Because that's exactly the thing that confused me now on this, making things unnecessarily complex, I think. So I can't check the index verb here. Let's drop this avenue for now. And let's see if I at least get this fixed by adding index to the alias list here. Website list spec. Cluster websites path. So that's actually this is actually a thing of the clusters controller. Clusters controller. Show, edit, update. Okay, I think that's now actually something that's left over from CanCanCan. Verify authorized, accept index, and that's exactly why this fails, I think. So that should be replaced by skip verify authorized only. Is there a reason why this project is called Dashboard API, but you have HTML as well? Because it's a combined thing. It's both a web UI and an API. Since I was pretty new to Rails, I decided, okay, let's not risk having to duplicate a lot of things between two separate applications, and that's why I decided, okay, we'll simply tack on the API part to the Rails application that also does the website. So just to show you this, we have the app root here, and there are the controllers, and there we have the normal web controllers, and there's an API subdirectory that actually has a few rudimentary controllers for the API as well. But the API isn't as fleshed out as the web application, because we haven't officially publicized it yet. So, did I run the test? Yeah, it does make things easier, because it's all there already. The same objects that I'm rendering on the website are available for the API code as well. And the API code, of course, is much more compact. Not sure if I'd do separate applications today, because there's a lot of overlap between these two things. Still doesn't work. Okay. Still displays an authorization error. It's also not the thing that I... It's the show thing. Wait. Cluster websites path. Cluster. What's that in the first place? Cluster websites, and there we have an index. So it does call it does call index for the websites, just nested under their cluster, right? Then again, the websites controller. Yeah, that's why we have the index here. We'll get the cluster ID as a parameter and then authorize the cluster and display the cluster's active websites. Okay, that makes sense. So we need to be authorized for the index verb of the websites controllers, which in turn oh, okay, I think... Okay, here. So, user needs to be able to, in order to manage, call the index for the websites, we should be allowed to manage the cluster. So it's back to the cluster policy. And here manage is connected to the user's company ID, and this must be equal to the cluster's company ID. Okay. Let's remove this code here. Make things more explicit here. We create a user. Oh no, we can't because we're using the same user. Here for the login. Then we create a cluster for this user, a website for this cluster, and calling the website's index. And that shouldn't give us an authorization error. short debugging exercise. Now we're getting to the more important stuff of my switch to action policy, actually, because these kinds of authorization delegations their number will grow, because I'd like to make the whole user permission structure more complex, and I'll have to get these more simple things working before I can get to the more complex things. So let's see, it calls it stuff. Does it actually? I really have to get rid of these deprecations here. That's awful. No. Website list with deleted with websites both fail with an authorization error. Let's take a look at the log. We're calling websites controller index as expected with the cluster ID. Then we get an authorization error. And then it renders the start page again. Why do we get an authorization error here? It gets the cluster. Index show edit update is all. Delegated to manage. New and create are always allowed for everyone. And manage then delegates to the cluster and calls its manage. How do we? That's on. How do we tell less to display ANSI? Is it -R? It is. Okay. So if you insert a company, wait. I think something is not really working here with the ANSI code. Something's not working right. Let's see if this works better. So we do update users because the user gets signed in. Here all the components of the website get created. Website here. Here the website gets created. Cluster ID is 2. And that's cluster ID should be 2 as well. And here we have a company. Insert into users. Company ID 2. Not really getting something out of this. I think I should get the thing resolved where the reasons don't get displayed. I guess I need to dive deeper into the action policy code to find out if there's any indication why the authorization fails, because trying to derive that from logs or from behavior is much harder than if I simply get a log output. But I guess that'll have to wait because I'm at the end of my session time. It's almost 5 o'clock here, and I'm also feeling that I've been thinking non-stop for 1.5 hours. So I guess it's time to call it a day. I'll wrap this up. I hope you found it interesting nonetheless. Please hit the follow button if you haven't done so yet, and tell your friends and colleagues about the stream. I'll upload a version of a recording of this session to YouTube. You can find that under youtube.fullstacksensei.com. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel as well, because that will get you notifications as soon as the recordings are uploaded and published. And follow me on Twitter. I'm at fullstacksensei, and let me know how I'm doing and if there's anything you'd like me to do on stream. Other than that, I think that's it. So thank you for watching, thank you for chatting, and until next time, take care.